Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week as always. And as always, I'd like to start by thanking the people that sent me a lot of these things. It always helps me out, and that would be David Walker, Barrett Peterson, Jason Dance, Sanders Slidnerink, and Chris Fowlon. Guys, thank you very much. If you have a tip for me, please feel free to send it along and I will give you a shout out here and also on my nationally syndicated radio show. And with that, let's dive right in because there were a lot of breaches this week, and let's start with Fortinet, maker of firewalls and threat detection systems. A threat actor has leaked a list of almost 500,000 Fortinet VPN login names and passwords that were allegedly scraped from exploitable devices last summer. If you didn't know, Fortinet firewalls had a rather large flaw that obviously has been patched and fixed since then, so make sure you're updating your Fortinets, but that's a huge problem. Now, while the threat actor states that the exploited vulnerability has been patched, as I mentioned, they claim that many VPN credentials are still valid. And obviously this shows how serious a leak of VPN credentials can be, not to mention the fact that this is how Colonial Pipeline was hit, stolen username and password connecting into the VPN for Colonial Pipeline. So, if you're using Fortinet products and you have the VPN service from Fortinet, make sure you are changing your passwords, especially if you're not brand new to Fortinet and you've had them since last year. Moving on, let's talk about Howard University because they canceled all of their classes on Tuesday in the wake of a ransomware attack the previous week, meaning a week ago. Now, the school said that it detected unusual activity on its computer network Friday, this is a week ago Friday, and intentionally shut it down to investigate. And according to an email that the students of Howard University received, and I quote, "To date, there has been no evidence of personal information being accessed or exfiltrated. However, our investigation remains ongoing and we continue to work towards clarifying the facts surrounding what happened and what information had been accessed." According to Howard, classes resumed on Wednesday, so hopefully Howard University is secure. Heads up, all you students and faculty. Moving on. Let's talk about MyRepublic. Now, this is an Asian Pacific telecommunications provider that has operations in Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand. They disclosed a data breach where the attackers accessed personal information of around 79,400 mobile subscribers. The unauthorized data access incident was exposed on August 29th, and basically the storage facility apparently where that was hit is now secure. Now, the exposed data basically has various information in it. So, for affected Singapore citizens, basically permanent residents and employment of and dependent pass holders, scan copies of both sides of the NRIC, and I'm not sure what that is, but I'm sure if you're in Singapore, you know what the NRIC is, that got scanned. Now, for affected foreigners, proof of residential address documents, for example, scanned copies of a utility bill, and for impacted customers, porting an existing mobile service number, name and mobile number was also breached as well. So if you use MyRepublic out of Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand, heads up to you, you might want to check in. Moving on, let's talk about McDonald's out of the UK. This is McDonald's, as in the massive American-based fast food company, because McDonald's UK, basically, they kicked off their Monopoly VIP game at the end of August. And if you've been to a McDonald's, you know they do Monopoly annually. I guess it's everywhere around the world. And basically, a recent round of emails sent to winners of the game's various prizes included more than just a coupon for things like free French fries. The franchise accidentally inserted passwords for a McDonald's server that hosted information tied to the UK Monopoly VIP game. In the wrong hands, obviously, these credentials could have been used to essentially rip off players or cheat the game on a massive scale. I mean, it's a huge, huge problem. Now, this was actually spotted by researcher Troy Hunt of Have I Been Pwned fame, along with some tech-savvy winners who realized, oh God, they just sent me the password to the server, and there you go. So heads up, all you McDonald's UK Monopoly VIP players. Hopefully you are secure now. Moving on, I have to say it's another week, and therefore there's another Microsoft disclosure. Seems like they're always making breaches of the week for the last couple of months. Now, Microsoft on September 9th revealed that it fixed a vulnerability in its Azure Container Instances services that could have been exploited by a malicious user to basically access other customers' information. Now, Azure Container Instances, or ACIs, is essentially a serverless container environment. I'm not going to go into what containerization is, but for the record, I'm a big fan of Docker. I've been using it since 1.0. Now, Microsoft says that it offers the flexibility of containers and security of VMs running on top of a hypervisor. No technical details of the flaw have been revealed. And basically, users should revoke any privileged credentials that were deployed to the platform before August 31st of this year. Basically, if you have an ACI, an Azure Container Instance, and you've had it since before August 31st, you need to reset all of the usernames and passwords, because apparently Microsoft, not necessarily saying it, but it looks like they had some kind of authentication vulnerability, and that's obviously a huge problem. So heads up, Microsoft ACI users. Moving on. Let's talk about the Welsh Government. The Welsh Government has broken data protection laws more than 300 times in basically less than 3 years. Now, breaches since the start of 2019 involved documents which included criminal allegations and personal sensitive data. Some of the breaches were made from a secure government site. A Freedom of Information request found for the Welsh Government. The Information Commissioner's Office said that people should expect personal data to be handled securely, obviously, and it wasn't. The Welsh Government says it takes data protection obligations seriously and carries out internal reporting processes. And it also added, quote, once a breach is reported, processes are reviewed where necessary. Remedial action is agreed with management. But the Welsh Government apparently isn't basically drinking the Kool-Aid that is the GDPR compliance, because they have breached this 300 times for the citizens that live under that government. So heads up to you, citizens, Welsh citizens. I guess it's not citizens of Welsh, it would be Welsh citizens. So with that, let's keep on rolling and keep in the United Kingdom, where the Welsh are, but we're going to actually be talking about GunTrader. Now, this is an update. If you recall, 111,000 UK firearm owners had their information stolen and dumped online because GunTrader, which apparently is a gun trading site in the United Kingdom, got hit. Now, here's what happened. Someone took the GunTrader hacked data and converted the data into a Google-compatible comma-separated values file, which makes it very easy to simply put that into Google Earth or Google Maps and basically have all of the addresses of every UK gun owner. Now, this person or group, and I'll get to that, actually spoke to the UK news outlet, The Register, and I quote, "If a judge and jury of our peers finds us guilty of any offense, we will of course accept the punishment with good grace and apologize to anyone who can be defined as a victim. However, we don't see what we have done as criminal." Now, what they're saying is they didn't actually steal the data was out there. They just took it and made it easily searchable and a place that would allow you literally to get directions from your house to the gun owner. Now, although the person used the pseudonym Ernie Goldman, their responses have been using basically we, us, indicating a group. Their blog is called Hunting Leaks and was featured in news reports earlier this year when it first emerged as a platform for doxing fox hunting supporters. Basically, in England, fox hunting is a very popular sport, or I guess it was a popular sport. It is a sport in England, let's just put it that way. So we're going to see, because this is obviously a huge, huge problem, because now essentially every registered gun owner in the United Kingdom, as of a couple of months ago, is essentially out there. And that's a huge, huge problem, obviously, for their privacy, not to mention the fact that these people are armed. So we're going to see what happens in the UK. Not a huge gun country like here in the United States, but nevertheless, a huge problem. Moving on. Let's talk about the Ragnar Locker ransomware gang, because a new tactic, interestingly enough, is emerging from Ragnar Locker. They are now warning that they will leak your stolen data if you contact law enforcement authorities like the FBI. The threat also applies to victims contacting data recovery experts to attempt decryption and conduct the negotiation process. So a lot of organizations will call me and say, "Hey, Nick, oh my God, we've been hit. We need your company, blah, blah, blah. Come in. We will negotiate with the attackers, try to get those things down on behalf of the insurance company or whatever that is." And so they're basically saying that the company now has to tell me that I can't contact law enforcement as well. So obviously that's a huge, huge thing. Now, in any such event, that this group finds, Ragnar Locker, the group will publish basically all of the data on the leak site. Basically, forcing you to stay away from law enforcement and experts, and essentially have to deal with this on your own. Obviously, a huge problem. We'll see what happens there, but I think some companies are going to be basically put in between a rock and a hard place. Ragnar Locker is very prolific on delivering ransomware. And with that, let's move on to Bangkok, Thailand. And I am going to butcher this, but I'm going to give this a shot. And I apologize to all of my Thai viewers if I'm screwing up your beautiful language. We are talking about the Bumira Jana Jarindra, I think I did that right, Kidney Institute Hospital, because the personal details of more than 40,000 patients at that Kidney Institute Hospital, I'm not going to try that again, have been stolen by an attacker. Now, the stolen data includes patients' personal information and treatment history, and apparently a man speaking English called the hospital later on Monday, this past Monday, claiming that he had hacked the system. And he said he would call again on Tuesday to arrange payment in exchange for returning information. That's all I've got right now for you, but I will keep you up to date on the Kidney Institute Hospital, including the word that I'm not going to say again. Again, I apologize if I butchered your language. I always apologize for that. Moving on. Let's come here to the United States and talk about the Virginia National Guard, because email accounts connected to the Virginia Defense Force and the Virginia Department of Military Affairs were impacted by a cyber attack in July, according to the Virginia National Guard. Now, the organization was notified in July about a possible cyber threat and began immediately investigating and coordinating with law enforcement. They did confirm that this was not a ransomware attack, so it could be something like a business email compromise scam that they're not saying. And if you didn't know, the Virginia Defense Force is an all-volunteer reserve of the Virginia National Guard. So heads up to you if you are in the Virginia Defense Force. Moving on, let's talk about the country of Morocco, because personal data of more than 2 million Moroccans was leaked by attackers on September 3rd. The cyber attack exposed the identity, profession, employer name, and email addresses of 2 million Moroccan citizens. Now, the attackers apparently employed the use of social networking site LinkedIn to retrieve this information. This database contained leaked information has been circulating on the dark web for several weeks now. And so heads up to you if you are in Morocco and on LinkedIn, and apparently there are 2 million of you in Morocco on LinkedIn. Somebody has scraped your information. Moving on. Let's talk about the French government's visa website. The personal data of visa applicants hoping to visit or immigrate to France have been exposed in a cyber attack that targeted the French government's France Visas website. Now, France's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of the Interior, which jointly manage the site, said the attack took place on August 10th and was quickly neutralized. The compromised data comprises details entered during visa applications. This includes email addresses, first and last names, dates of birth, nationalities, passport numbers or identity card numbers. No financial or sensitive data as defined by the GDPR was compromised, said the government ministries. The press release did not disclose how many individuals were impacted or the date ranges with those applications. So if you've had a visa application to either travel or immigrate to France, let's say in the last decade or so, you might want to check in with the country. Moving on. Let's talk about Confluence. Now, if you don't know what Confluence is, or by Atlassian, they are very highly collaborative software that a lot of corporations and organizations use. I've used it myself. It's pretty cool. Now, the U.S. Cyber Command, unfortunately, though, is warning of an ongoing mass exploitation attempts in the wild targeting a now patched, they've patched this, but a critical security vulnerability affecting Atlassian Confluence deployments. The flaw in this specific incident could be exploited to execute arbitrary code into the server or a data center and obviously gain control or get access to data and information. According to the cybersecurity firm Census, around 14,637 exposed and vulnerable Confluence servers were discovered right before the details about this flaw came to public on August 25th. That number has since dropped to 8,597 as of September 5, as companies continue to apply Atlassian's patches and updates and pull afflicted servers from being reachable on the internet. And we are now starting to see disclosures by third parties that use Confluence. And this week it's Jenkins, which is a popular open source automation server software that it uses Atlassian's Confluence, to manage their business. So if your organization uses Confluence, you've got to make sure that it is completely updated or not exposed to the internet, and ideally both updated and not exposed to the internet in any which way. Moving on, let's talk about the United Nations, because the United Nations has confirmed its infrastructure was breached earlier this year. Additional attacks also linked to the earlier breach have been detected and are now under investigation. And to quote a spokesperson for the United Nations, we can confirm that unknown attackers were able to breach parts of the UN infrastructure in April of 2021. Now, these attackers likely broke into UN infrastructure using a stolen username and password of a UN employee bought on the dark web. We just talked about Fortinet to kick this off. This is the same problem. I don't know if the UN uses Fortinet or not, but nevertheless, it's the exact same problem as it was with Colonial Pipeline. Now, these credentials granted access to an account for Umoja. This is the UN's proprietary project management software. The account attacker's access was not protected with multi-factor authentication, according to the report. And from this entry point, the attacker or attackers could further infiltrate the UN network. Reese Security found this breach, and they claim that the earliest known date of the attackers forensically was on April 5th. They were still active as of August 7th. So obviously that's a huge, huge problem. We'll see where that goes, but hopefully the United Nations will get that locked down. And finally, we have to talk about Protonmail, because Protonmail, you broke my heart. Oh, you broke my heart on this one. You really did. Now, here's what's going on. End-to-end encrypted email service provider Protonmail has drawn criticism after it ceded to a legal request and shared the IP addresses of anti-gentrification activists with law enforcement authorities, leading to their arrests in France. Now, if you didn't know, Protonmail is based in Switzerland, and they said they received a, quote, legally binding order from the Swiss Federal Department of Justice related to a collective called Youth for Climate, which it was, quote, obligated to comply with, compelling it to hand over the IP addresses and information related to the type of device used by the group to access their Protonmail account. Now, on their website, Protonmail advertises, and I quote, no personal information is required to create your secure email account. By default, we do not keep any IP logs, which can be linked to your anonymous email account. Your privacy comes first. And here we go. Now, despite its no IP logs claim, the company acknowledged that while it's illegal for the company to abide by requests from non-Swiss law enforcement authorities, it will be required to do so if Swiss agencies agree to assist foreign services such as Europol in their investigations. Quote, there was no possibility to appeal or fight this particular request because an act contrary to Swiss law did in fact take place, and this was also the final determination of the Federal Department of Justice, which does a legal review of each case. This is what the company said in a lengthy response posted on Reddit. To put it simply, Protonmail will not only have to comply with Swiss government orders, it will be forced to hand over relevant data when individuals use the service to engage in activities that are deemed illegal in the country. This includes monitoring IP addresses from users in, quote, extreme critical criminal cases, end quote, according to their transparency report. Now, in a blog post titled Important Clarifications Regarding Arrest of Climate Activists, Proton CEO Andy Yen said the company, quote, can be forced to collect information on accounts belonging to users under Swiss criminal investigation. This is obviously not done by default, but only if Proton gets a legal order for a specific account. Furthermore, in a revision to its privacy policy, Protonmail now explicitly spells out that it will be forced to log users' IP addresses if found in violation of Swiss laws. I'm reading that as essentially they're not going to log it unless the Swiss government comes in and says, hey, we want to look at Nick's Protonmail account. You start logging that account, they will turn on the logging for my account, and now they've got those kinds of logs. And for the record, I get it. I really do. I mean, they belong in a country. The Swiss have excellent privacy laws, but this kind of flies in the face with what they say. I mean, their default response, you would imagine, is, well, we don't log. We don't have that capability to log. We are audited by third parties that can prove that we don't log. So how can we turn this over to you? And they're saying, well, because we're in Switzerland. If the Swiss government orders us to do this, that's a problem. If any other government, like the United States or any other European government or anyone around the world, government-wise, comes and says, hey, we want this, Protonmail will say, no, you've got to get permission from the Swiss before we do anything. So it's still super private, and it's still encrypted end-to-end, because you'll know what they're saying. Oh, we're not reading the email, like, oh, here's, what Nick sent the terrorists or whatever. They don't have that because it's end-to-end encrypted. But what they're doing is giving the metadata to say, oh yeah, Nick connected from this IP address and this kind of device, it was an iPhone, it was an Android, whatever it was. And so that's essentially what they're doing. But it's kind of like, the way I think about it is, it's kind of like thinking that, you've gone your entire life and you've thought that Superman is completely invulnerable. Nothing can hurt Superman. And then you find out about kryptonite. And it's like, there's one thing that can hurt that guy. Okay, fine. But he's impenetrable for everything else. And I think that's kind of the way I look at Protonmail in this situation. Nevertheless, it's kind of heartbreaking, because as somebody that is a huge privacy advocate and believes in end-to-end encryption, and literally just did, a video/podcast on WhatsApp and how Facebook is just completely violating the clause of their claim of end-to-end encryption, it's a huge, huge problem. So Protonmail is not reading your stuff. You can sign up anonymously. I have a Protonmail account. I recommend Protonmail over Gmail, because it is significantly more private and not data mined like a Google would be, and I will continue to do that. But there is one caveat. They do have one kryptonite, and that is Swiss law. And so those were your breaches of the week. Were you affected? Let me know. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, everyone.